A Spanish physician, Maria Belon, her husband Enrique, and their 3 sons traveled to a vacation resort on the coast of Thailand to celebrate Christmas as a family. Unbeknownst to them, around 8 a.m. on Sunday, December 26, 2004, there was a massive earthquake deep beneath the Indian Ocean off the coast of Indonesia. Later that morning, a devastating tsunami rolled ashore, sweeping away everything in its path, including Maria Belon and her family. Enrique and 2 of their sons were swept in one direction. Maria and her 3rd son were swept in another. Though sustaining injuries, they survived and were reunited later that day. A 2012 movie based on their experience, The Impossible, has gotten high marks for the accuracy of its portrayal of the power of the tsunami. But the consensus among survivors is that nothing can communicate the helplessness of being swept along as the ocean has its way. Water goes where water wants to go. It's what we normally think of when we talk about being awash, like the streets being awash with water and mud after a flash flood. And we've transferred that image to non-flood situations. We say we were awash with relief when we get a positive medical report. A crisis in Washington, D.C. results in a press briefing being awash with reporters. We can even feel like our body is awash with stress after a traumatic event. When we hear or read those examples, we know exactly what is meant. Some kind of wave, water, people, emotion has swept in and dominated a situation. While awash is almost always used in negative situations like floods, it's a good word for what it conveys: energy, power, and complete coverage, dominance, and more. Because we know what a flood or tsunami looks like, let's reverse the connotation and think about it in positive terms. What would life look like if we were awash with passion for God and our place in His purpose and plan? When a tsunami comes rolling ashore, nothing else matters. In the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and again in the 2011 Tohoku, Japan tsunami, the water swept away all obstacles: seawalls, buildings, boats, cars, trees, people, animals. The water just kept coming, almost in slow motion. Nothing could stop the energy and passion of the tsunami. It's like a tsunami has a life force of its own. Like a tsunami washing over a coastline, I believe it is possible to be awash with passion in life. And many people are. For some people, it's a hobby. For others, it's a sport. For an entrepreneur, it's a vision of dominating a market. For a candidate, it's the desire to change a city, state, or nation. People are passionate about all kinds of purposes. Seeing so many different kinds of people being passionate about so many different causes says something important. Passion is part of being fully human. I'm making no judgment here about what people are passionate about. I'm only saying that passion is a gift from God to every human being. But I'm not sure every human being is enjoying the benefits of living a life that is awash with passion. What are you passionate about? If I spent some time in your home, or we enjoyed a 2-hour lunch together, or I talked with some of your friends, would I discover your passion? I hope I would. I don't believe God wants anyone created in His image to go through life at half throttle. God created us to be awash with passion. As hard as we may try, it ought to be impossible for us to ignore our passion. Even if you're not sure what you are or could be passionate about, I believe there is passion waiting to be ignited in the heart of every human. Like a tsunami rolling ashore, our passion should overcome everything in its path. We ought to be able to say, I can't help it. This is my passion. I hope you don't need it, but I am writing this article to give you God's permission to discover and unleash your passion for life. You have inside you the capacity to invest your mental, emotional, and spiritual gifts in a way that glorifies God, impacts the world, and satisfies your own soul. I believe that, and I want you to believe it too. What does passion look like? I think that's often a function of personalities. You and I have seen all types of passionate people. Listening to person A talk about his passion might be like trying to drink from a fire hose, but person B might communicate her passion by her schedule and activities. Her calendar is full of priorities that reflect her passion. But one thread ties together all passionate people. They are consumed by their goal. They may pursue their goal in different ways, but they are constantly removing obstacles and extraneous activities in order to stay focused. Like a tsunami that sweeps away everything in its path, passionate people know their destination and pursue it. Take 2 biblical examples, Jesus and Paul. 2 different passions, 2 different styles. Jesus' passions seem to have been due to the will of his Father in heaven. In the Gospel of John, there are no fewer than a dozen references to Jesus being completely committed to doing the Father's will. For example, most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner. John 5:19. That is consistent with Paul writing about Jesus divesting himself of his own prerogatives and becoming a servant when he came to earth, Philippians 2:5-8. Jesus didn't yell, get in people's faces, or throw his weight around to display his passion. He simply lived and breathed his submission to God, the Father's will, culminating in his final submissive act, not as I will, but as you will, Matthew 26:39. Jesus' passion was to please God with every word, breath, and act. Paul was awash with a more specific passion, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles. Indeed, that is the task Christ himself gave Paul, Acts 9:15, 22:21, and 26:15-18. And Paul never wavered from that task from the time of his conversion to the time of his death. He was bold, demanding, confrontational, decisive, courageous, and sacrificial, all wrapped in a cloak of pastoral care and love for those he knew needed the gospel, Romans 9:1-5. Paul gave up everything for the sake of fulfilling the commission of Christ had given him, Philippians 3:7-14. Jesus and Paul were awash with passion. The object of their passion differed because their callings from God were different. But again, they were united by the same thread, unyielding, unswerving, uncompromising passion for completing the mission God gave them. I'm talking about two overlapping ideas in this article. First, God created you to be a person of passion. Second, as stewards of God's gifts, our passion should be directed toward the glory of God. Consider 1 Corinthians 10:31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Let me paraphrase that verse to demonstrate how large the palette of passion can be. Therefore, whether you are a teacher, a homemaker, a poet, a painter, a writer, a businessman, a politician, a nurse, a social worker, a pastor or missionary, a heavy equipment operator, a cab driver, a pilot, an athlete, a parent, a student, a scientist, a plumber, a graphic designer, a software engineer, a merchant, or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. I don't know what God wants you to be passionate about, but I do know He wants you to live awash in passion, to help you think about loving life and living life passionately, loving life eternal more than anything temporal, and focusing on the gospel would be the most important passion for all children of God through Jesus Christ. To help you think about living life passionately, consider tuning in to more of Turning Point with David Jeremiah to learn more of the Bible's teaching. And on your own, ask God to help you discover or refine your passion. Ask Him to release the desires of your heart in ways that will glorify Him. Psalm 37:4. Pray about ways to make the changes in your life that will allow you to release and pursue your passion today.